You ever wonder how a single act of kindness, one that cost you more than you can afford to give, can become the turning point of everything? Not just for someone else, but for you too? This is the kind of story that starts quiet, like wind in tall grass, like the sigh of trees on the side of a forgotten mountain. It starts with a girl most people would pass on the road and never remember. But it won't end that way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Because this is a story that stretches across places and hearts, and no matter where you are, I promise, it'll find you. Amara had dirt under her nails, frost in her breath, and no business dreaming about things like magic. But she did anyway. Every morning she rose before the sun touched the peaks and tied back her coarse black hair with the same threadbare ribbon her mother had left behind. It was frayed, almost grey, but it still held. She slipped her boots on in the dark, careful not to wake her father. He'd gotten worse again, his cough deeper, his steps slower, his face drawn tight like a drumskin. But he still smiled for her when he could, and that was enough. They lived at the edge of the village, where the pines thinned and the stone. Paths grew wild. The cabin leaned slightly east, like it was bowing to the forest. Amara liked to think the trees respected her little home, letting it stand all these years when storms tore down everything else. She carried a basket slung over, one arm and a knife on her belt, not for protection, but for pruning bark and slicing roots. She knew every path, every herb, every pocket of moss that brewed healing if you boiled it long enough. And that morning, she wasn't looking for miracles, just enough nettle for tea, maybe a handful of wild garlic if the ground hadn't frozen. Too deep. She never expected the blood. It was just a flash, deep red streaking across stone, barely visible in the pale morning light. Her first thought was an injured fox. But the trail wasn't darting. It dragged, heavy, human. Her heart hammered once, twice, and then her feet were moving before her brain had caught up. She followed the streaks down the path, past the frostbitten ferns and cracked boulders, until she found him. He was sprawled at the foot of a craggy slope, half buried in leaves, one arm twisted at an ugly angle. Blood had dried on his temple. His shirt, some kind of dark wool, was torn open, revealing deep bruises and scratches across his chest. One boot was missing. Amara froze, scanning for any sign of breath, but then he coughed, raw and ragged, and she dropped to her knees. "Hey, you're all right, don't move," she whispered, voice low, like talking to a wounded deer. His eyes cracked open, pale, grey-blue, like winter. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a wet rasp. She didn't ask questions. She tore her shawl and wrapped it around his ribs, stuffing moss underneath to slow the bleeding. She tugged his good arm over her shoulder and, step by excruciating step, dragged him the half-mile back to her cabin. It took everything she had. By the time they reached her door, her muscles screamed and her breath came in short bursts. But she didn't stop. Inside, she laid him on the cot her father once used when he could still climb stairs. Now it would belong to the stranger. She boiled water, cleaned the cuts, ground dried roots and whisper leaf into poultices. Her hands moved without thought, practice guiding instinct. She remembered her mother's voice teaching her each step, remembered the way she used to hum softly while mending. Hours passed before the man stirred again. He blinked up at the ceiling, disoriented. Then his gaze slid to Amara, sitting silently by the fire, sharpening her blade on a stone. "Where?" he croaked. "You're safe," she said simply. He flinched when he tried to move. "My phone, broken. I found it shattered near the rocks." He went quiet, eyes closing again as pain crept across his face. "I'll get you food soon," she added. "You'll need to keep something down." "No hospital?" Amara shook her head. "You wouldn't have made it there." "Not like that." He looked at her longer then, really looked, and something passed between them, a strange flicker she couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite trust, just a pause in the world. He didn't tell her his name, not that day, not the next. But he didn't try to run either. Amara spoke little, and he liked that. She cleaned his wounds, helped him sit up, eased, broth into his mouth with careful hands. She gave him space when he asked for it, and silence when he needed it most. Her father raised an eyebrow when she introduced the stranger as someone hurt on the trail. But he said nothing more, just coughed and said, "We help who we can, girl." The mountain taught us that. The days turned cold, colder than usual. Snow crept in overnight and painted everything soft and white. Amara kept the fire going and reinforced the windows with old quilts. The stranger didn't complain once. One night, she caught him staring at the wooden beams overhead, eyes glossy with something he didn't speak aloud. "Pain makes the days longer," she murmured, stirring the stew. He glanced at her. "You always talk like that." "Like what?" "Like the forest's been whispering to you your whole life." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it has." He didn't laugh, but his shoulders eased. That was enough. She never asked who he was, not because she wasn't curious, but because sometimes knowing the truth too soon ruins things. And something about this man, she knew his truth would be heavy. But for now, in the hush of falling snow and firelight, he was just a man trying to breathe, and she was just a girl with dirt on her hands, holding his pieces together. The man never gave his name. Days passed, slow and steady like meltwater trickling down rock. He remained in that small back room, wrapped in patched quilts and the scent of boiled herbs. His wounds closed, but not all the way. His body mended. His silence did not. Amara didn't push. He spoke only when necessary, a nod for water, a hoarse thank you when she helped him sit up. His voice, when it came, carried weight, measured, deep, the kind people listen to without understanding why. Yet every word felt like it was dragging itself up a mountain just to be heard. His hands, though bruised and swollen, were elegant, long, fingers with careful movements, not the hands of a laborer, not calloused. They trembled when he first tried to hold the spoon Amara gave him, and she didn't miss the flicker of embarrassment in his face when he spilled it down his chest. "You'll get steadier," she said softly, wiping his shirt without judgment. He didn't answer. But that night, he kept the spoon. One morning, after a harsh night of coughing, he whispered a sentence that sent something strange through Amara's chest. "I thought I'd die out there." She didn't look up from grinding fever root. "Most people do," she said, "when they fall near the river bend." "I didn't fall." His tone made her freeze. He met her eyes for a long beat, then looked away. Amara didn't ask, but her mind burned with questions. What did he mean? If he didn't fall, then how did he end up battered and bloody in the middle of the woods? Still, she waited. He had nothing on him. His coat had been fine, wool-lined and tailored, not the kind you see in mountain villages. His boots had once been polished, even if one was missing now, and the ring she'd found in his pocket, heavy, gold, inset with some crest, was hidden in a box under her floorboards. She didn't mention it. People in her world didn't own rings like that. People in her world didn't forget their names. She began calling him Sir, half-jokingly. He raised an eyebrow once, but he never corrected her. By the 6th day, he could stand with her help. By the 8th, he made it to the porch. She found him there that morning, wrapped in her father's old coat, eyes scanning the mountains like they held answers. "You shouldn't be out here," she said, stepping beside him. "I need to see where I am," he murmured. Middle of nowhere. His lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "No, this place, it's quiet, too quiet. It's the trees, they keep secrets." He looked at her. "Do you?" Amara didn't answer. A strange rhythm settled between them after that. He helped her when he could, stacking kindling, stirring stew, learning the rhythm of her tasks. She let him. It was easier than arguing, and in those shared silences something grew. Not trust exactly, but something close. One night, while fixing a crack in the window frame, he let slip a name, not his, just a word, Elias. It fell like a coin into water, soft but heavy. Amara turned, but he had already gone quiet again, eyes distant, body stiff. Later, she checked the ring. Engraved in tiny cursive were the initials, E.G. Elias. Maybe not the full truth, but a corner of it. She didn't sleep well that night, not from fear, but from the hum of something coming, a shift in the wind. The kind of storm that doesn't rattle trees, but lives inside people's choices. The village still didn't know. She kept him hidden. When people came by, asking for tea or salves for the cold, Amara met them on the porch. She offered excuses. Her father was resting. She was busy preparing winter stores. She didn't let anyone step inside. She told herself it was kindness, mercy, giving a wounded man time to heal. But she also knew what would happen if they found out. The elders didn't trust outsiders, and someone dressed like Elias had no place in their world. No one comes to the mountain unless they're running from something or chasing ghosts, and Amara had never known anyone who outran both. One morning she woke to find him staring at the fire. "You dream loud," he said, not unkindly. She rubbed her eyes. "Sorry. You said a name." "Mara." Amara's throat tightened. "That was my mother's name." He nodded. "She gone. Long time." They didn't speak after that, but the silence didn't feel cold. He began asking her questions, quiet ones. What herbs worked best for pain? Why did she stay in a place like this? Had she ever seen the city? She answered, with truth but never too much. "No," she said once, "I've never left the mountain. Never had a reason to." He looked at her then, really looked. "You do now," he said, more to the flames than to her. Amara laughed under her breath. "And what reason's that?" He didn't say, but his eyes lingered. That night, after she'd gone to bed, she passed the little room on her way to fetch water. She heard him whispering, tossing in his sleep. "No, stop. I trusted you." Names, places, a woman's voice, gunshots, metal doors. She stood frozen, the water tin clutched to her chest. Then she stepped away and let him dream alone. Whatever his past was, it had teeth. And though he never said it, Amara began to realize something. This man hadn't just been hurt, he'd been hunted. It was the 10th day when everything shifted. The sky had turned leaden with snow again. Heavy flakes drifted like ash, thick enough to mute the world. Amara was outside, chopping wood, her breath sharp in her chest when she saw the boot prints. Too large to be her own, too fresh to belong to a memory. She stilled, heart kicking against her ribs, axe frozen mid-air. Then she saw the second set, heavier, trailing behind. 2 pairs, heading toward the cabin. Not from the village, from the woods. She dropped the axe, ran. Her boots crunched across, the frost, lungs burning by the time she reached the door. Inside, Elias sat by the fire, flipping through one of her father's worn paperbacks. "Elias," she hissed, rushing to close the curtains. "We have to hide you." He stood too fast, wincing, the healing still not done. "What is it?" Tracks, 2 people, coming from the north bend, his jaw clenched, not with confusion, but recognition. "You need to go," she said urgently, grabbing his coat. "The crawl space, now." But he didn't move. Instead, he limped to the kitchen, gritted through the pain, and pulled open the cabinet under the sink. Behind the tins and stacked jars, he reached for the loose panel she never thought anyone noticed. "You knew it was there?" "I've hidden before," he muttered. She helped him down into the space, tight, dark, lined with old sacks of flour and dry wood. He winced as he crouched, but said nothing more. Before she closed it, he met her eyes. "If they ask, you haven't seen me. They won't hurt me," she said, but his voice turned stone cold. "That's not what I'm afraid of." She shut the panel. Seconds later, a knock, 3 hard raps. She inhaled, steadied herself, and opened the door. 2 men stood in the snow. One wore a dark windbreaker with expensive-looking gloves, the other a tan parka stained at the sleeves. They didn't smile, didn't greet her. Their eyes slid past her shoulder. "Apologies," the gloved one said, voice clipped. "We're searching for someone. May have gotten lost near the ridge." "Lots of people get lost," Amara replied evenly. "Mountains not forgiving." The second man held up a photo. "You see this guy?" She glanced. A printed image. Elias, except here he wore a clean suit, standing beside a jet, looking nothing like the half-broken man who now hid under her sink. She forced her face to blankness, shook her head. "No, don't know him." "Sure?" The man pressed. "Positive." They glanced at each other. "Mind if we come in?" the first asked. Not polite, not really asking. "I do, actually," she said. They blinked. "My father's sick, and we don't take kindly to strangers uninvited." The gloved man stared at her, measuring. Something flickered in his gaze, disbelief or disdain, she couldn't tell. Finally, he tucked the photo away. "If you see him, let us know. He's dangerous." She smiled faintly. "Most things up here are." They left, but not without a final look back. She waited until their footsteps faded into the trees before she opened the cabinet. Elias climbed out slowly, shoulders stiff. "They knew where to look," she said quietly. "I know. You ran from them." "I did." She opened her mouth to ask what he'd done, what he was running from, but the words caught. Elias sat back down by the fire. "They weren't police," he said finally. "Not really," she nodded. "Figured." He looked older somehow in that moment, not in age, but in burden. 10 days ago, he began, I was on a flight out of the city, charter jet, headed to Geneva for a meeting I didn't even want to attend." He rubbed his eyes, tired. "I had everything, power, money, people who answered to me with a phone call, and then..." He swallowed hard. "I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. About the company, about laundering, bribes. Worse. My name was on documents I never signed. They were going to pin it all on me, make me disappear quietly." He looked up. "So I ran." Amara sat very still. He continued, voice low, words unraveling like old thread. "I had friends, I thought, called one to meet me at a cabin upstate, but they sold me out. I barely escaped the ambush, crashed through the woods, lost everything. Then I woke up here." He didn't cry, but something in his face cracked. Amara knelt beside the fire. "Why tell me now?" "Because you lied for me." He looked at her, raw. "You could have given me up, but you didn't." She didn't say she almost had, that when they showed the photo, her tongue had gone dry and her mind had screamed, "This is bigger than you." She didn't admit how terrified she was now. But she met his eyes and said, "You saved yourself, I just opened a door." He laughed softly. The sound was bitter. "That's all some people ever need." They didn't speak more that night. But something had changed. The stranger in her home was no longer just a wounded man. He was Elias Granger, heir to one of the biggest private fortunes in the country, and now a ghost in hiding. Amara didn't sleep. She kept her boots on, and beside her bed, the knife, just in case someone came knocking again. Snow kept falling, but now it felt like a warning. The next morning, Amara woke to find Elias already up, leaning against the windowsill, watching the trees. "They'll come back," he said, not turning. She didn't ask who they were. She didn't need to. She poured tea instead, set it down on the table between them. He didn't touch it. His mind was somewhere far beyond the forest, some boardroom. with marble floors and double crosses layered like expensive suits. Amara had never been rich, never wanted to be, but she knew the kind of people who built their empires on silence and leverage. She'd watched a cousin disappear after blowing the whistle on illegal mining downriver. She understood, maybe more than Elias realized, how easy it was to become collateral. "You need to disappear," she said finally. His head turned. "I already have." "No," she said, "not like this. If you stay here, they'll find you. And when they do—" She didn't finish. He understood. The fire crackled. Her breath fogged the glass. "They've frozen your accounts, haven't they?" He nodded. "Everything. I can't even access my own name." "So you're dead," she said flatly. "At least on paper." Elias cracked the smallest smile. "That's one way to put it." "Then we treat it like a funeral," Amara said, standing. "You bury what's left, and you rebuild from ash." He looked at her, long and slow, like she'd just said something sacred. "You've done this before," he said. She nodded. "I know how to vanish." He didn't press for details. She was grateful. They spent the next 2 days preparing, not with suitcases or maps, but with silence, coordination, and gut-level planning. Amara showed him how to use dye from crushed bark to alter his hair. She lent him her father's old clothes, loose enough to hide in plain sight. She gave him her spare satchel, told him which trail markers led away from the ridge without crossing the village. But she also did something Elias didn't expect. She stayed. "This isn't your problem," he told her, as they packed dried meat and pine salve into his bag. She looked up from the task. "It became mine the moment I dragged you through that door." He started to object, but something in her face stopped him. Not pity, not obligation, conviction. That night, as the wind howled outside, they sat. On the floor beside the fire, shoulders barely touching, Amara broke the silence. "You loved someone before all this." Elias was quiet. "Then I did. She betray you." "No," he whispered. "She died." A long silence followed. "Accident?" He shook his head. "Cancer. Slow. Ugly. And I wasn't there enough. I was chasing business deals in Tokyo while she was learning how to tie her scarf around her bald head." His voice cracked. "I thought money could fix it, buy time, buy comfort. But all it did was let me pretend I wasn't losing her." Amara closed her eyes. He wasn't the only one who'd lost someone to time. "My father died in the middle of winter," she said. "Right on that cot. I didn't have enough firewood. Couldn't afford another batch of fever root. I begged the elders for help. They gave me prayers instead." Elias didn't speak. He just reached for her hand. They sat that way until the fire died down. Two people, wrapped in scars. When dawn came, so did resolve. They would leave together. No plan, no destination, just the woods, the mountains, and the knowledge that staying was no longer safe. But fate wasn't ready to let them go. Because, as Amara opened the door that morning, something impossible waited at the edge of her path. A letter, folded, pressed under a stone. There was no return address, no footprints, just her name, written in looping ink across the front. She opened it slowly, fingers numb from more than cold. Inside were 4 words: "He's not who you think." No signature, no explanation, just dread. She looked up at Elias, who stood in the doorway, watching her carefully. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer, not yet. Because suddenly Amara wasn't sure who she'd brought into her home, or who had been watching from the trees all along. She didn't sleep that night, not because of the cold, or even the quiet breathing of the man now curled on the floor beside the hearth, but because of that letter. "He's not who you think." It echoed in her chest like footsteps down a hollow hallway. By morning, The paper had softened from how often she'd turned it over in her fingers, as if touch could conjure meaning from its silence. There were no tracks in the snow when she found it, no sign anyone had been there. Whoever left it knew how to vanish. Amara had spent her life trusting instincts over facts, and right now, her instincts were splitting her in two. One part of her, the part that had watched Elias limp through fever dreams, that had held his trembling hand as he recounted the betrayal, told her the letter was a trap. Someone wanted to shake her, rattle her grip on the only person she'd let close in months. But the other part whispered something colder. What if you're the one being used? What if Elias wasn't just a hunted man, but something more? She stirred the fire quietly, then walked to the cupboard, pretending to check supplies. Behind her, Elias moved. She could feel his gaze before he spoke. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you." He was silent a moment. "Something's wrong." She turned, meeting his eyes. "Tell me something real." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "Something you haven't told anyone. Not your lawyer, not your board, not your mirror." His brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because someone left a note with my name on it. No footprints, just a warning." Elias paled. "What did it say?" She watched him closely. "He's not who you think." The words hung between them, jagged and bare. He didn't speak right away. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. "Amara, if I were here to hurt you, don't you think I would have done it by now? That's not an answer." He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "There are parts of my life that don't make sense outside the world I left behind," he said. "If I told you some things, you'd think I was lying. Or worse. Try me." He hesitated, then exhaled. "My company." He looked away. "It wasn't just finance. That was the face. Behind the scenes, we funded defense tech, surveillance, predictive behavioral AI." Her stomach tightened. "I didn't know at first," he said quickly. "Not all of it, but once I did, I tried to push back. That's when things started unraveling." She crossed her arms. "Why were they chasing you? Really?" "Because I had proof. Documents, names, projects buried so deep they don't even show up in government archives. And I was going to leak it all." He held her gaze, no longer begging for trust, just laying down the final card. "That's who I am," he said. "A man who made a kingdom out of money, then decided to burn it down when he saw what it was built on." For a moment, silence. Then Amara stepped closer. "If what you're saying is true, they won't just stop at freezing your accounts. They'll erase you." He nodded. "They already have." She rubbed her temples. "And now I've let you into my home, fed you, stitched your skin back together. I never asked you to." "But I did," she snapped. "I did it because I thought I saw something worth saving." His face softened. "And you were right." A beat passed. Then, quietly, she asked, "Are we safe here?" Elias looked toward the mountains, then down at the floorboards, where only yesterday he'd hidden like a fugitive. "No," he said, "not anymore." Amara blew out a slow breath. "Then we don't wait. We move tonight." They packed only what mattered: salted meat, a flask of oil, rope, a compass her father had trusted over any map. She tucked the letter into her coat pocket. Not for answers, but as a reminder. Trust no one fully, not even the broken ones. By dusk, the air was thick with snow again, the sky bruised, purple and grey. They stepped out into it like shadows, moving low between the trees. Amara knew the terrain better than any tracker, knew which trees creaked in the wind and which bent at the waist when you passed. But halfway down the eastern trail, she froze. There, just ahead, past the hollow stump, was smoke, not the soft, pine-sweet kind from a winter fire. This was black, acrid, and rising fast. She grabbed Elias's arm. "That's the cabin." He looked back, stunned. "We didn't leave anything burning. They burned it," she said, voice tight. "Whoever left that note." They came back. Elias's jaw locked, a home gone, a past scorched clean. She didn't let herself mourn. Not yet. They turned sharply and took the ridgeline path, steeper, more dangerous, but less known. By midnight, they were miles away, curled beneath the rocky outcrop she and her father used to camp under when the rivers swelled too high. Elias was shivering, not from cold, but from realization. "They'll never stop, will they?" he asked. Amara pulled her coat tighter around her. "Not until you're no longer a threat. Then I'll always be running." She stared at the stars. "No," she said softly. "You'll be rising." He looked at her, eyes heavy. "You've already fallen," she said. "The next part is what you choose to become." The wind picked up, but neither of them moved, because even as the mountain erased their footprints behind them, they both knew the real climb was only beginning. The sky cracked with thunder, not the kind born from clouds, but the internal kind, the sound of something old breaking. Amara sat with her knees drawn to her chest, watching Elias sleep in the shadows of the rocky overhang. His features were softer in sleep. Stripped of the businessman, the fugitive, even the grief-stricken widower. For just a moment he looked like any other man lost in the woods. But they weren't just lost, they were hunted. When morning came, the wind had slowed, but the tension had not. Elias stirred beside her, groaning as he stretched against the cold stone. "Dreams were better than reality last night," he murmured. "Then don't open your eyes," she replied, brushing snow from her boots. But he did, and what he saw made him sit up fast. In the valley below, two figures moved, barely dots against the whiteness, binoculars, radios, hunters, not the kind with rifles and deer tags. Amara dropped down instantly, pressing him flat against the earth. "They're not here for the view," she whispered. "How did they find us so fast?" "Because you don't just vanish from that world," she muttered. "You tear a hole when you leave it, and she just helped him tear it wider." They waited, breath tight and shallow, as the men disappeared into the tree line. When the silence returned, it was deafening. Amara knew they had hours at best. They headed north, deeper into the ancient pass where the terrain turned jagged and the paths twisted like veins. Her father once called it the spine of the world, said no one followed you past the ridge unless they were willing to die trying. Perfect. As they hiked, Elias spoke less. He was limping again, the cold biting through his coat. But he didn't complain. Amara kept checking behind them every few minutes like a heartbeat. She knew signs to look for: broken twigs, disturbed snow, shadows that didn't belong. So far, nothing. By nightfall, they reached a cave. It wasn't deep, but it had stone walls and a narrow entrance, easy to hide, hard to breach. They ate in silence, just dried roots and a strip of venison Amara had cured weeks ago. When the fire began to burn low, Elias finally spoke. "There's something else I haven't told you." She turned slowly. "Now seems like the wrong time for secrets." "No," he said, "but this one might matter." She waited. He pulled a thin object from inside his coat lining, wrapped in waxed cloth. A drive, encrypted, black casing, no markings. "This has the names," he said. "The documents, the files they're chasing me for." She stared at it. "You carried it here? I couldn't leave it behind. If I die, this still has to be found. And if they catch you, it's proof you still have leverage," she muttered, eyes narrowing. He nodded. "Exactly." Amara stood, pacing now. "You brought danger to my home, Elias. To me. To me. You should have told me sooner." "I didn't trust you yet," he said softly. Her eyes flashed. "And now?" He looked up. I'd follow you into fire. She stopped. That wasn't the answer she expected, nor was the heat rising in her chest. She knelt, reached for the drive, studied it in the firelight. You think this will save you? No, he said, but it might save others. She nodded, handed it back. Then it's worth more than your life. Elias looked down. And what about yours? She didn't answer. Because right now, she wasn't sure she had one left. The next morning brought a strange quiet. No wind, no birds, just cold and stillness. Too still. As they stepped out of the cave, Amara's gut twisted. She motioned for Elias to stop, then crouched, examining a patch of snow near the rocks. Boot prints, fresh, heavy. They hadn't been alone. They've circled around us, she whispered. How many? 2. Maybe 3. They're moving wide, driving us into the ridge. Trap? She nodded grimly. We don't give it to them, he said, hand tightening around the drive. Amara looked at him, then pulled something from her satchel. A second drive, identical in shape, a decoy she'd carved from old scrap metal and charcoal. When I say run, don't argue. He opened his mouth, but the look in her eyes closed it. They moved fast, through brambles and rock scrambles, along frozen ledges that dropped into black nothing. Amara led the way, heart thundering against her ribs. Then came the shout, "Stop!" Voices sharp, echoing through the ravine. Amara turned, saw them, 3 men, black jackets, guns drawn. She stepped forward, hands raised. Elias froze behind her. "Stay there," she told him. The men shouted again. She pulled the decoy from her coat slowly, held it up like a trophy. "Is this what you want?" she called. They didn't answer, just moved forward, closer, closer. Then she threw it, hard into the ravine. Gone, one of the men cursed. The others ran to the edge, shouting into radios, but it was too late. The data had fallen where no one could reach. In that moment of chaos, Elias grabbed Amara's hand, and they ran, through the trees, through the wind, through the fear. And as gunfire cracked behind them, missing wildly, they disappeared once again, not just from sight, but from the lives they once knew. And ahead, far ahead, something new waited, not safety, not yet, but something close enough to hope. They ran until their lungs felt like broken glass and their legs turned to iron. The forest swallowed them, branches clawing, snow devouring their footprints as fast as they made them. By the time Amara collapsed against a pine, heart thudding like a drum in a funeral march, Elias dropped beside her, gasping, but neither said a word. Not yet. Silence was survival. Only when the cold seeped too deep into their bones did Amara speak. "There's an old ranger station," she said, breath fogging the air. "Northwest. 2, maybe 3 miles. Elias nodded. "Will they expect it?" "Maybe," she said, "but it's either that or die out here." They moved slower now. The adrenaline had bled away, leaving exhaustion in its place. But still, they moved. The snow changed as they climbed, less powder, more ice. Everything sparkled cruelly in the morning light. After 2 hours, the cabin came into view, half buried in snow, the roof sagging, a rusted satellite dish hanging off the edge like a loose tooth. But to Amara, it was sanctuary. She kicked open the door. Inside, the air smelled of old dust and pine rot, but the walls stood firm and the fireplace still worked. That was enough. They didn't speak for nearly an hour, just breathed. Elias finally leaned forward, holding his hands near the fire. "You saved my life again." Amara didn't respond. "I mean it," he continued. "If you hadn't thrown that decoy, they would have had us. I don't even know how you thought of that." She stared into the flames. "I learned a long time ago, sometimes survival means giving them something to chase, even if it's not real." His eyes softened. "Was that before or after the mountain?" "Before," she said. "Way before." He waited, but she didn't. "Explain." Because some stories stay buried, even when you trust someone. Instead, she asked, why didn't you destroy the real drive? He looked down. Because it's not just about surviving anymore. She tilted her head. It's about making sure they don't win, he said. Even if I don't live to see it. There was something in his voice, not just conviction, but finality. It scared her more than the men with guns. She stood abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the woods. You said you'd follow me into fire, she said quietly, but would you let me carry the torch? He stood behind her now, closer than he'd ever been. I'd hand it to you myself, he said, if it meant we both got out. Their eyes met in the reflection. On the glass, a fragile thread stretched between them, but before either could speak, the radio crackled. Not theirs. The old unit mounted on the cabin wall. A voice came through, faint, broken by static. Copy, North Ridge. Confirm visuals on target. Amara's blood went cold. Elias moved slowly, turning the volume down. Another voice replied, signal lost. Repeat, target is not secured. They were scanning, close enough to try open channels. She turned. They're sweeping the ridgeline. They don't know we're here yet. He nodded grimly. Can we move? Not tonight, she said. The storm's coming back. And sure enough, when they stepped outside, the sky had turned to steel. They'd have to ride it out. Inside, Elias leaned against the wall while Amara checked the supplies. Some old canned food, batteries, a flare gun half rusted, barely enough to last a week. But it would have to do. Later that night, the conversation turned quieter, softer. Memories, not plans. I wasn't always like this, he said suddenly. She looked up, running, afraid. No one's born afraid, she replied. It gets taught. I used to think power meant safety, he said, that if I built something big enough, strong enough, no one could touch me. And did it work? He shook his head. Power just made me a bigger target. She stirred the fire. You weren't the only one who thought that. He glanced at her. What did you lose? She paused, then finally, my father. Elias sat up straighter. He worked for a mining company, she said, up here, told the truth about their shortcuts, safety violations. They made an example out of him. Elias said nothing. They called it an accident. But I found his journal. He knew they were watching him, knew they'd come for him eventually. She swallowed hard. He died trying to protect people who didn't even know his name. Elias moved closer, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. He gave me something better than safety. What? Purpose. And in the silence that followed, something shifted. Two people, once strangers, now bound by ghosts, both trying to outrun legacies that refused to die, both realizing, perhaps for the first time, that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant choosing to matter. The fire crackled. Outside, snow fell heavy and slow, burying the world in quiet, and for a brief, impossible moment, there was peace. The peace didn't last. By morning, the air had sharpened. Snow covered the windows like ash, and inside the cabin, every breath fogged the air. The fire had long since burned down to coals, but neither Amara nor Elias had slept deeply. The unease pressed against them, a second skin. Amara stared at the embers, eyes bloodshot from restless hours. She dreamt of footsteps, too close, too fast, and a door that wouldn't lock. Elias sat with his back against the wall, arms crossed over his chest for warmth, but the tension in his jaw said sleep had eluded him too. He spoke first. They won't stop, will they? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she unzipped her satchel, pulling out a thin piece of bark with marks scratched into it, an old map etched by her father's hand, passed down like a prayer. There's one more place, she said. Remote, high altitude, hard to. Breathe up there. His eyebrows rose. You want to climb? I want to disappear. He studied her. That place? Does it have shelter? A cave, deep enough to hide in, and a stream nearby. I've used it before. He nodded slowly. Then let's go. They packed in silence. What little they had, dried food, a flare, her father's knife, the encrypted drive. Amara tucked the real drive deep into her boot, where it pressed against her ankle with every step. Before leaving, she lit the old ranger cabin on fire. Elias turned to her as the roof crackled, smoke pouring into the grey sky. "You sure?" She didn't flinch. "They need to believe we died in it." And as the blaze consumed the structure, smoke rising like a ghost, they walked away, upward, toward thinner air and thinner chances. The climb was brutal. Every step higher felt like dragging a body that wasn't your own. The snow was knee-deep, and the trail was more animal track than path. Elias struggled. His breath came in wheezing gasps, and Amara had to steady him more than once. But he never asked to stop. She admired that. Not just his resolve, but his silence. He wasn't the man from the hotel anymore. Not the suit, not the headline. He was someone else now, someone closer to the earth. By dusk, they reached the ledge. The cave was just ahead, hidden behind a curtain of pine and a wall of jagged stone. They slipped inside, exhausted, muscles trembling from the cold and the climb. The cave wasn't large, but it was enough. Dark, dry, shielded from the wind. Elias collapsed against the wall, laughing breathlessly. "That's the second time I thought I might die this week," he murmured. Amara smiled faintly. "You're getting better at it?" He laughed harder. It echoed strangely inside the stone. Later, she boiled snow over the small fire they'd managed to build, handing him a tin cup. He drank slowly, then looked at her, eyes darker than before. "If I don't make it," he said, "you'll know what to do, right?" Amara tensed. "You're not dying. I'm serious. So am I." He looked away, then pulled the V-drive from his coat and held it out to her. "I trust you." She didn't reach for it, not yet. "You still don't get it," she said. "Get what?" "You're not dying because I didn't climb a mountain and outrun trained killers just to bury you in a cave." He stared at her. "You're not a lost cause," she added, voice trembling now. "You're a man who tried to fix a broken world. That matters." Something cracked behind his eyes, a dam he'd held together with silence and pride. "I didn't think anyone would ever say that to me again," he whispered. She looked at him, then reached out, touching his hand, not the drive. "We don't give up here," she said. They sat like that for a long while, no words, just breath and presence, but peace again was a borrowed luxury. In the early hours of dawn, Amara stirred at a sound. Not wind, not ice cracking. Voices. Far below, distant but deliberate, she jolted Elias awake. "They found the cabin," she whispered. He blinked, alert now, and followed the trail. She nodded. It wasn't over. "We can't stay," she said. "Not much longer." He sat up, jaw clenched. "Where now?" Amara stood, pacing in tight circles. "There's an old service. Tower at the summit, barely used, but it has a signal. You want to upload the files?" "Not just upload," she said. "Broadcast, all of it." Elias hesitated. "They'll trace it." "Good. Let them come," she said, eyes sharp. "But the world will know before they reach us." He looked at her like she was fire, dangerous, brilliant, alive. They prepared to move again. Each step now wasn't just survival, it was revolution. She felt it like a spark in her chest. And as they looked out at the blizzard-shrouded peak, two silhouettes against a storm, Amara whispered, "We're not running anymore." And Elias nodded, the wind stealing his breath but not his resolve. The mountain wasn't just hiding them now, it was sharpening them. For war. They started before the sun rose. The world was still dim, the sky not yet ready to commit to morning. Ice crusted every surface, and the wind had teeth. Each gust stung like needles as it whipped through the trees, but Amara moved like a shadow through it, focused, practiced. Elias followed, slower but steadier now. Something hardened in him since the fire. The summit was cruel. The path turned. Vertical in places, little more than frozen ledges and switchbacks carved into brittle stone. The mountain didn't welcome them, it tested them. Amara's fingers went numb beneath her gloves. Elias fell once, blood running from his temple after a brutal scrape against a rock face, but he didn't stop. Not this time. Because now, the climb wasn't just about escape, it was about making noise. They reached the tower by late afternoon. A rusted skeleton of metal and forgotten purpose, the structure leaned slightly westward, as though it, too, had grown tired of standing. But the satellite dish still clung to it. So did the narrow shack at its base, half collapsed, doors hanging. From the hinges, Amara shoved the door open with her shoulder. Inside, it was dark, the floor littered with broken plastic and mildew-stained manuals. But in the corner stood a control panel, a relic of analog signal broadcasting. She knelt beside it, brushing off decades of dust. "It's intact," she said. Elias crouched beside her. "Can it transmit?" With a boost, she nodded. "Might take everything the battery has." "Will it be enough?" She looked at him. "We only need one shot." He unzipped his jacket and handed her the drive. The real one. Amara connected it to the ancient interface, fingers moving like they were born for this. The files glimmered to life. Names, dates, ledgers, offshore accounts, video footage, boardroom threats, evidence of crimes hidden in legal fog. Elias sat down across from her, his voice rough. "There's a document in there. My final statement. Play it first." She nodded. He watched her for a beat longer, then said, "Make sure they hear it, Amara, not just the numbers. The truth." Her gaze met his. "They will." She flipped the switch. The generator rattled to life, coughing smoke into the room, and the signal light blinked red. She initiated the upload, and then the transmission. The speakers outside hissed, then broadcasted Elias's voice across the frozen ridgeline, down the mountain, and through the valley where hunters were still climbing. "This is Elias Ward." His voice cracked through the static deep and cold. "If you're hearing this, it means I've failed to hide any longer, but not before exposing the rot beneath everything you think is real." He went on, naming names, detailing accounts, implicating his own company. It was a confession and a declaration of war. And Amara, watching the bars fill on the screen, felt something rise in her chest. Hope. But hope came with a price. Outside, the wind picked up, but it wasn't alone. Distant, almost imperceptible, came the sound of boots on ice. Elias heard it too. Amara's fingers flew over the keys. 70% uploaded. "We have minutes, maybe less." She handed him the flare gun. He shook his head. "You take it." She didn't argue, just tucked it into her belt. Then she grabbed the second drive, the decoy, and placed it near the panel. "When they get here, they'll destroy the shack. Burn everything. I want them to think this was all of it." He studied her, realization dawning. "Then where's the real one?" Amara said nothing, but the weight against her ankle, the shape pressing into her boot, said enough. His eyes widened. "You're going to run?" She nodded. "They'll come for me. I'll lead them away, buy you time." "No." "Yes." Elias moved fast, catching her wrist. "You're not sacrificing yourself for this. Not for me." "It's not for you," she said, voice cracking. "It's for all the people who lost everything, just like my father. If this dies with us, they win." His grip tightened, but her eyes didn't waver. "I'm not dying today," she whispered. "I'm surviving." Loudly. The signal hit 90%. She pulled away, grabbed her pack, and sprinted for the back of the shack, where the cliff dropped into the next ravine. A rope bridge waited, swaying violently in the wind. Elias followed her outside. The broadcast still roared behind them, echoing through the gorge. "We'll meet at the base," she called over the storm. "East side, under the broken ridge." He nodded. "I'm trusting you," she said. "And I'm coming back," he promised. Their eyes met for a breath. Then Amara turned and vanished across the bridge. Below, The forest churned with movement. Helicopter blades, boots, voices. The mountain had awoken. Elias stood tall as the first shadows appeared at the tree line. He didn't run. Not yet. He stepped back inside the shack, watching the final percentage creep upward. 98%, 99%, a breath, 100%. He yanked the drive from the panel, tucked it into the floorboard. Then, calmly, he stepped into the open and waited for the wolves. The descent was chaos. Amara's breath came in ragged bursts, lungs burning as she ran through the dense forest. Snow had turned to ice beneath her boots, forcing careful, quick steps. Every crack of a twig, every shifting shadow set her nerves on edge. Behind her, the distant roar of the broadcast still echoed, her signal, her rebellion against the invisible chains strangling the world. She didn't look back. Not yet. The howling wind carried voices, deep, harsh, relentless. Men who didn't know mercy. But Amara had something they didn't: purpose. Her father's journal, the encrypted drive, the truth locked inside. She carried it all with her, as heavy as the mountain air. Hours passed like minutes. Then shapes emerged, black-clad, figures slipping through the trees, moving fast, weapons drawn. Amara dodged behind a boulder, heart pounding so loud she feared it would give her away. But something else stopped her. A hand, rough but steady, grabbed her shoulder. She spun around. It was Elias. His face was smeared with dirt and sweat, eyes burning with fierce determination. "You made it," he said, voice low. She nodded, chest heaving. "Good," he said. "We're not safe yet, but I have a plan." She followed him through a tangle of underbrush to a narrow ravine, where a thin, frozen stream cut through the rock like a scar. "This way," he whispered. They moved quickly, slipping through a maze of caves Elias had discovered on a previous expedition. Darkness swallowed them whole, but the air was warmer here, protected. They paused in a cavern where the snow couldn't reach. Elias pulled out a small satellite phone, cracked and worn but functional. "Time for one last call," he said. Amara watched him dial numbers, waiting as the line connected. A voice answered on the other end, a trusted ally, someone from Elias's hidden network. "We're ready," Elias said simply. They transferred the encrypted data, the final piece of the puzzle. "This will take down the entire operation," Elias whispered. Amara smiled despite the cold. "But it won't stop the fight," she added. "No," he agreed. "It's only just beginning." Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside the cave. They both froze. Voices shouted, "Search the area! They must be close!" Amara's hand slid to the flare gun at her belt. Elias reached for his knife, but before the hunters could break through, the cave entrance exploded in a blizzard of gunfire and shouting. Amara and Elias ducked behind a rock. "This is our chance," Elias said. They sprinted deeper into the labyrinth, every step pushing them further from capture, closer to freedom. But the mountain had more secrets yet. As they moved, Amara caught sight of a faint light ahead, a hidden exit, a chance to escape into the night. Her heart surged. "After you," she said with a grin. Elias smiled back. Together they dashed toward the light, out of the shadows and into whatever waited beyond. Because sometimes saving a life isn't just about the moment. It's about fighting for every moment after. The night air hit Amara like a wave, sharp, cold and free. They spilled out of the cave mouth onto a narrow ledge that overlooked the valley below. The stars were dim, swallowed by a rolling fog creeping through the pines. Below, flickering, lights moved, search parties combing the mountain, desperate and angry. Elias crouched beside her, breath steady but eyes sharp. "We're not out of the woods," he said, voice low. "They'll keep hunting us." Amara swallowed the lump in her throat, but for the first time she felt something else, possibility. "Do you think they'll listen?" she asked, nodding toward the broadcast, still echoing faintly in the wind. He shrugged. Some will, some won't. But it's out now. There's no taking it back. She studied his face. The man who had been a mystery, a stranger, a burden. And now her ally. A man who had everything to lose, yet chose to trust a poor girl with his secrets. "You saved me," Elias said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I thought I was beyond saving." Amara shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just helped remind you." He looked away, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "The people I hurt, they won't forgive me." "You can't fix the past," she said gently, "but you can change the future." They stayed there a while, watching the fog crawl through the forest like a living thing. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a lonely sound, but powerful. Then Elias stood. "We need to move. There's a town downriver. My contacts will meet us there." Amara nodded, feeling the weight of what was ahead. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. They began the steep descent, navigating rocky outcrops and tangled roots. Every sound was amplified, the snap of a branch, the crunch of ice, reminders. That danger was never far. Halfway down, Amara stumbled. Elias caught her just in time, her face flushed with embarrassment and exhaustion. "You're stronger than you think," he said, steadying her. She smiled, a tired, genuine smile. For the first time, hope wasn't just a whisper. It was a steady pulse. When they reached the river, a small wooden dock creaked under their weight. The water was black and cold, flowing fast. Elias pulled a small boat from the shadows. "We cross at night," he said, "then blend in." Amara hesitated, looking back toward the mountain, now a dark silhouette against the sky. "Do you think you'll ever come back?" she asked. He met her gaze, eyes softer now. "I hope so. But if I don't, promise me you'll keep fighting." She nodded. No matter what. The boat rocked gently as they pushed off, the current pulling them away from the mountain and into the unknown. The valley lights faded behind them, and with every stroke, Amara felt the weight of her old life slip away. Ahead was something new, a life rewritten, a story still unfolding. The town at the river's bend was nothing like the mountain. Warm, lights spilling from storefronts, the hum of life bustling even in late hours. It smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread, a stark contrast to the sterile cold they'd left behind. Amara blinked, unused to so much warmth and noise. Elias guided her through narrow streets, careful and quiet, despite the lively scene around. Them. His contacts were waiting, two figures cloaked in shadows outside a small cafe, faces sharp with urgency. "We don't have long," one whispered as they pulled Amara and Elias into the dim interior. Inside, the cafe's warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. Steam rose from mugs of tea as whispered plans unfurled. The network Elias had built was vast. Activists, journalists, hackers, all ready to spread the truth now freely in the public eye. Amara listened, heart pounding. The encrypted files weren't just data anymore, they were weapons of change. And for once, she felt like she belonged. But beneath the hope was still the cold edge of danger. "We need to protect you," the other contact said. "They'll come for the source first." Amara swallowed hard, the reality settling over her like frost. "This is bigger than just me," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside. Elias reached out, taking her hand. "You're not alone in this." She looked at him. This man, once a stranger, now an anchor in a turbulent sea. Outside, the town slept unaware of the revolution blooming beneath its quiet streets. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her choices and the faint spark of something fierce growing within her. Tomorrow, the world would change, and she would be ready. Days melted into nights as Amara settled into a life she never imagined, away from the mountain's harsh silence, submerged in the pulse of the city. But the past clung like a shadow, always lurking behind every smile and every knock at the door. She learned quickly that freedom was fragile and trust a dangerous luxury. Elias became her constant, more than just a companion, a man marked by guilt and hope, his past unraveling piece by piece. Together, they navigated the underground, currents of their fight, broadcasting the truth like wildfire. Each revelation shook foundations, and the powerful trembled in response. Yet it wasn't just about exposing lies, it was about rebuilding. One evening, as they pored over messages from allies around the globe, Amara looked up, her eyes sharp but tired. "I never thought saving one man could change so much," she said softly. Elias smiled, the weight of his burdens easing for a moment. "Sometimes, saving one life saves thousands." She reached out, squeezing his hand. For the first time, the billionaire and the poor girl were no longer worlds apart. They were partners, in a fight that had only just begun. The pressure mounted. News outlets began picking up the leaked evidence, igniting public outrage. Protests erupted in cities far from the mountain, demanding justice. Elias's former allies turned enemies, hunting not just him, but everyone connected to the truth. Amara felt the weight of every headline, every threat that slipped through the cracks. She knew the mountain's danger hadn't left her. It had, only transformed, following her into the light. One night, as sirens wailed nearby, Elias and Amara found themselves cornered in a safe house. The walls felt closer, the air thicker with tension. "We can't run forever," Elias said quietly. Amara looked around, then back at him. "We don't have to." A plan had been brewing, an audacious move to confront the powerful directly, to turn the tables once and for all. Together they prepared for the final act, because some battles are fought not for survival, but for the soul of the future. The day arrived like a storm breaking, raw, unstoppable. Elias and Amara stood side by side before a packed hall, cameras flashing, the weight of a nation's gaze settling heavy on their shoulders, the billionaire who had hidden in shadows and the poor girl who dared to save him now stood as one, a force unyielding, unbreakable. Elias's confession played back on massive screens, every detail laid bare. Amara's voice joined his in telling their story, raw, honest, filled with the pain and hope that had brought them here. The crowd listened, breath caught between disbelief and awakening. When the last word fell silent, a ripple of applause swept through the room, hesitant then growing into a roar. Change was no longer whispered in dark corners, it was shouted from rooftops. Later, as the world shifted beneath their feet, Elias took Amara's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. She smiled, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. "You saved me," she whispered back, "not just the billionaire, but herself. Because sometimes the poorest girl on a mountain can rewrite the fate of a man and the world." Their story was no longer one of survival, it was legacy. Every life has a moment where everything changes, a single decision, a simple act of courage that ripples outward, touching countless others in ways we never imagine. Amara's story is a reminder that even in the darkest places, hope can rise. It's a testament to the strength found in kindness, the power in truth, and the unexpected paths that lead us to our destiny. When she reached out that day at the Eid Day, foot of the mountain, she didn't just save a man. She set off a chain reaction that would shake foundations and inspire change. And Elias, a man burdened by his past, found redemption not in wealth or power, but in honesty and connection. Their journey was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but through it all, it revealed something timeless, that no matter who we are, where we come from, or the challenges we face, the courage to stand up for what's right can change everything. So wherever you are watching this from, whatever your story might be, remember that your actions matter. Sometimes the smallest gesture can ignite a revolution. Sometimes saving one life can save many. Thank you for joining me on this journey. with Amara and Elias. If you felt moved, please like and subscribe. It means the world to me. And don't forget to share your location and local time in the comments below. I love hearing from all corners of the world. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and until next time, keep your soul open to the stories waiting to be told.